Thank you, Loa. That was a wonderful introduction, and thank you, both Loa and Simon, for curating this fantastic exhibit. I breezed through yesterday, and many of you still have to see it, but it's really a wonderful, wonderful, not just exhibit about 2012 in the Mayan calendar, but about Maya civilization. Some stuff I had never seen before was in that show. So it's really wonderful to be here and to be here with you all. My talk today is about the Maya calendar, but I hope it's about much more than that. I'm going to spend some time talking about the mechanisms of time, the structure of Maya time, although one thing to remember is that you can get pretty good descriptions of the Maya calendar in lots of different places. So I don't want to spend a lot of time doing that. That'll also put everyone to sleep very quickly if I talk about just the mechanics of time periods and all of that sort of thing. What I want to try to do, however, in a bigger picture, is put this much more in a cultural context by looking at the way the ancient Maya, especially the classic Maya, integrated time and calendrics into the fabric of their cosmology and also into the fabric of their politics, of kingship and the ideology that really was the basis for the way that Maya kings and Maya rulers presented their role in society and their role in the cosmos as a whole. Quickly advance here. Maybe dimming the lights might help a bit too to see some of the slides. That's a good dimming right there. Thank you. Now, we've come a long way, right? We've come a long way in Maya studies. We all know this, and we celebrate that. That's one of the things that really has motivated the Penn Maya weekends, the workshops in Austin, and lots of other events, over the past, say, 30, 40 years. We've made great breakthroughs in deciphering glyphs. The calendar has been known for a long time, the basic structures of the calendar, although there are new things that we always seem to come across that are a bit of a surprise, things that we didn't think we would find, new aspects of even calendrical information from time to time. Now, I think it's right to celebrate all of these wonderful advances that we've had, but I want to go back to, let's say 50, 60 years, to an interesting quotation by the great Mayanist Eric Thompson. Here's a wonderful photo of him, I think in the year before he passed away in his library in England. And he wrote in 1950 in his great work, Maya Hieroglyphic Writing, an introduction, "I conceive the endless progress of time, the supreme mystery of Maya religion, a subject which pervaded Maya thought to an extent without parallel in the history of mankind." Right? We are familiar, I think, with this paradigm back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, where calendrics and timekeeping was at the center of the archaeological study, in some ways, of the ancient Maya. Right? Sylvanus Morley was very famous, of course, for going off into the forests of Penn and finding new inscriptions, bringing home the bacon, as he used to call it. And he would record these texts in sketches in his notebooks and photograph them, but to our frustration, he would only sketch and photograph the bars and dots. He would only look at the dates, right? We're missing historical information that at the time wasn't deemed that important or that exciting. So this was really what was driving a lot of the epigraphy, certainly, in the mid-20th century. This idea that the Maya were obsessed with time. And, of course, things change very soon afterwards, beginning in the late 50s. Tatiana Proskuriakov very famously publishes in 1960 her paper on the monuments of Piedras Negras, identifying rulers, identifying history. But it's important to point out that she is using calendrics. She is using the framework provided by dates and the Maya interest in giving you very precise dates. She's using that to create her great, elegant argument about the history of Piedras Negras and the existence of history. So this is a a paradigm shift, of course, in the way Mayanists have approached the ancient documents and really transformed Maya archaeology. It's now a historical enterprise in a very big way. Well, I would like to propose that we might try to reconcile these two paradigms. In other words, what Thompson had to say, and many of his contemporaries, about the Maya being obsessed with time, that's not really wrong. I actually think they were obsessed with time. In the classic Maya, if you look at monuments from Piedras Negras or from Copan, you do get a sense that the calendar, the linear progression of the lung count, at least, was something that was front and center in the way Maya kings sort of talked about themselves and talked about their rituals and their activities. And something that I think helps to really demonstrate this, and Proskuriakov didn't really get into this, of course, in her paper, but looking at this monument, which is here, of course, in the museum, Stela 14 from Piedras Negras, if we look at it, and this has been pointed out by Karl Taube and several other people, Bruce Love has written about the Paris Codex, right? One of the later Maya documents. This badly preserved page that you see next to the monument is one of the Khatun pages from the Paris Codex. This is a record of the seating of the Khatun. A Khatun is one of these 20-year periods. What we've known for a number of years now is that the iconography, the symbolism of the crowning of a historical king, as Proskuriakov rightly identified it, is couched visually in the same vocabulary as the seating of the Khatun Lord, right? So time, the periods of time of the calendar are treated in the same way that a Maya king is treated, or vice versa, right? The symbolism of taking office is couched in much the same way as the beginning of a Khatun or the beginning of a time period. These two things are collapsed in ancient Maya thinking, right? So this is not a purely historical scene of a king being placed on a throne up high on a scaffold. Metaphorically, or maybe even in a much more direct way, there is an equation between the king and the time period. The person of the king and the abstract notion of time are brought together. Okay, and this is something that's very hard for us to really grapple with, I think, from our own cultural background, but this is really something that was key to the classic Maya. So, let me spend a little bit of time just talking about mechanics here, just to make sure that we know where we are. There are really three different calendars, and I'll spend just a few minutes going through these, from simplest to most complex. We have the 260-day cycle, which is known to many, composed of 20 day signs and 13 numbers, and these combine in all of their possibilities to in 260 individual days. This is roughly equivalent to 9 months, and it's been considered a strong possibility, was proposed many years ago, that this might reflect the period of human gestation, right? And in fact, this calendar still exists. It still is being used in the highlands of Guatemala and also in parts of Oaxaca in Mexico. This was used all over Mesoamerica, and many modern Maya today directly point out that yes, this is related to the period of human gestation. So it's bound to the life cycle of human beings in a very profound way. We're familiar with many of the graphics of how the system works. Again, I won't spend too much time on this because in the exhibit here, there's some beautiful, beautiful graphics showing how these systems all work and how they all intersect with one another. Imish, Ik, Akbal, and so forth, right? The 20 days ending with Ahau, right here. I'll come back to him. This is an old system, right? One of the first hieroglyphs, in fact, I think this was the first hieroglyph that Bill Saturno excavated at San Bartolo, complete shock and surprise at the time, is a date expressed in this 260-day system. A day sign with a number, in this case 1, on top of it. This might be an early version of 1 Ahau. We're not exactly sure which day it is. And we also have, I love this example, painted on the walls of Washaktun. It's kind of a Maya version of a day timer, right? It's like a calendar written on the wall, day by day, across here, right? And so you have, 7 Muluk, 8 Ok, 10 Chuen, 11 Eb, 12 Ben, 13 Ish, 1 Ben, 2 Kib, 3 Kaban. And then something interesting happened on 10 Chuen, I guess. So they wrote a little thing about it. This is just a straight, very simple way of expressing a day in a shorthand form, so to speak. Now, one thing to point out, which I'll come back to later, is that one of the key days in this system, the last one in the list, is very familiar. It's very easy to recognize this day sign in many inscriptions. It's the day Ahau, right? And the thing to really keep in mind is that the meaning of this day is the same word that we know means Lord or ruler. It was a very common title, of course, in ancient Mayan texts. So the actual name of the day is king, all right? And this is something that is fundamental. It's a fundamental connection that we see expressed in the art and in the writing of the classic period. And I'll come back and kind of give that some more context in a second. There are these beautiful representations, animate representations of the day sign, Ahau, shown here, for example, from Kirigua, where the portrait of a king actually is the animate version of that day. Right? So this is just a fancy way of writing 7 Ahau. Right? This is one of the most elaborate of Maya hieroglyphs, but it's just recording a day in the 260-day system. Now, in addition to that, we've got, of course, another cycle of 365 days. This is a solar year. This is a calendar that was probably tied much more to agricultural cycles, to festivals. We know this from the Aztecs. We know this from the post-classic Maya, from Anda's Relación, for example. And it's composed of 20 so-called months. No, I'm sorry, 18 so-called months of 20 days. And then 5 days added on at the end, so you have 365. This use of 20 in both cases is related to the idea that in Mesoamerica, counting is not a base 10 system, it's a base 20 system. Right? 20 is one of the fundamental numbers in Mesoamerican numeration. In Mayan languages, the word for 20, one of the words for 20, winik or winak, is the same as the word for person, human being, because they're 10 digits and 10 toes, right? So the Maya counted that they looked at their feet when they were also coming up with the system, unlike in Europe. So when the Maya are writing dates, often in calendar-round fashion, they'll combine these things, right? 260 position, here's 13 Ahau, and that same day in its station in the 365-day system. And in this case, it's the 8th day within the month Bat, or Sots, as it was called, right? So this is a calendar-round date. They're just giving you more context, more information about how to express a day. And these are the dates we see all over the place in Maya texts. A combination of a day here in 260 system and one in 365 will repeat about every 52 years. So, pretty much once in a lifetime for the ancient Maya, you will have one of these dates. And, there are many examples of these calendar-round dates showing up. For example, here famously at Copan on Altar Q. This is the inauguration date for the ruler of Copan, Yash Pasah Chanyupat, and he's receiving the emblems of office from the founder, Kinich Yashkukmo. And the date is really centered there. It's centered because it's giving you the context of that cross-time connection between one ruler and the next. Now, in addition to all of this, there is the long count, okay? Now, the long count is known to many, but I want to explain a bit more of it today. There's some things about it that have come out in the last couple of decades that I think are pretty fascinating. So, bear with me. I want to spend a few minutes talking a bit about the complexities of the long count. We have lots of examples of long count dates in Maya texts and painted on walls. And this is a place notation system using 5 units, okay? Baktuns, Katuns, Tuns, Winals, and Keens. Again, I'm not going to take a whole lot of time explaining this because it's been known for a long time. When you see a date like this in a book on the Maya, that's a long count date. This is a 260-day station. That's a 365-day station, right? So 8, 19, 1, 9, 13, 4 Ben, 16 Mol, right? And the basic unit here, although there was some debate about this for a long time, is not the individual day. It's really the Tun period, which is of 360 days, almost a year, right? What's sometimes called a vague year. So the units above the Tun are a base 20 system that just sort of counts these units to the powers of 20. So that a Baktun is about 400 tuns. Well, it's exactly 400 tuns, not about, right? And it's that many days, precisely. So we're talking about big periods of time when you get up to the top here, right? And so a long count, all that's doing is it's giving you an interval of days from a base starting point, as we've known for many, many years. And according to the correlation that we now use, or one of the variants of the correlation we now use, have used for a long time, that base date is in 3114 BC. And that gives us the correlation that allows us to equate a Maya date to one in our calendar, right? That's how that works. So the base date, basically it's like the odometer, right, where you, in your car, where you bring everything down to 0. The way the Maya wrote it was this way, with a 13 in there, and I'll come back to that in a second. Okay. Maya history, the framework of Maya history as the Maya conceived of, really had to do with what are called period endings. These are important stations in the long count where the higher periods are set at 0. Or I should say the lower periods are set at 0, but they're kind of stations of these higher periods. So for example, this is a period ending recorded at Piedras Negras, 9, 15, 10, 0, 0. That is a period ending. A Katun ending, 9, 16, 0, 0, 0. A Baktun ending, 10, 0, 0, 0, 0. That's a big period ending, right? Very important. Baktun endings are really what we should be talking about because if you look closely at the calendar, as we understand it, that's what we're running up against right here. The correlation sometimes is December the 21st, sometimes it's December the 23rd. Those are just two variants of the correlation we use. Either way, we have approaching very quickly the end of the Baktun. Okay, so this gives you the Baktun endings in history counting from 3114 BC. Okay? In fact, I think I give 2 correlations here. I'm inconsistent in my usage. August 11th or August the 13th. So Maya history is right in here. All right? This is the colonial period down in here, and here we are in 2012. So 13 Baktuns are about to turn over, as we all know. That's why we have all 13 Baktuns on our name tags. But notice that not only is it just one of these normal Baktun endings, a run-of-the-mill Baktun ending, it's not. It's the turning of 13. It is a repetition of the 0 date, so to speak, that took place many, many thousands of years ago. So, this is where a lot of the brouhahas come from. Right? We have this idea that this is a closed system. Right? And if you look at this slide, it looks like a closed system, doesn't it? But it is not. Okay? We know that it is not. There will be a 14th Baktun, and a 15th Baktun, and a 16th Baktun. We know that because of the way the ancient Maya wrote certain dates in the future, okay, just mathematically. So the Maya calendar is not going to end, okay? It is an anniversary. It's a re-expression of this important cosmic date that was in the very beginning of this particular Baktun count, okay? So, where we can turn to now is this unassuming monument, although it's kind of impressive if you look at it up close. Remember, from a distance it's not that great looking, but this is Stela 1 from Koba, right? And a well-known monument now because it has a remarkable date on it. When it was first discovered, no one really noticed this, but if you look closely, it's eroded, but it's got a bunch of 13s, right? And what this is 13,000,004 Ahau. This is a record of the 3114 BC date, but using the full system. What I've described to you so far is the abbreviated system of 5 units. The long count has 5 units most of the time, but the full system has 24 units. All right, so here's the Baktun, and you have to put 19 units above that to show the full system. This is what they're writing. Okay? It is amazing. It's incredible. Now, they like this, I think, at Koba, because there is a rather elegant symmetry here. You have the number 13, which is so important in Maya cosmology. You have 20 13s, right? There are 20 of them here, right? And that's by design. And there's that juxtaposition of 20 and 13 again, right? Which is like the 260 calendar. There are 4 zeros left over. Very nice. The number 4 is very, very important in Mesoamerican cosmology. And it is for a how, right? So they're mathematically expressing a wonderful moment in the cosmos where you have this very elegant layout of numbers and structure. Right? Now, to demonstrate that this is just a much larger expression of the regular long count, about 30 years ago or so was discovered this ball playing scene, this stone at the site of Yaxchilan, showing a mythical depiction of the ruler bird jaguar as a ball player sacrificing one of his captives, but it's shown in a mythical context. They're depicting a historical scene, this mythology. Very, very common in Maya art. And they record the date of this ball game, of this ball court dedication, this way, right? It's a straight, normal long count, except they're giving you those earlier 13s. In this case, they're giving you 9 of them. 9 is another nice number that the Maya liked. They don't have the space to maybe show them all. But this, I think, demonstrates that this was the true structure of the long count. They just didn't write it all the time. In fact, we only now have a handful of examples where they write all of these higher periods, or many of these higher periods. But it's incredible when you think about it. If you go back to the period ending from Piedras Negras, we have to kind of think of these 13s as being there, but not being written necessarily. And this is one way to conceive the structure, right? If we take the periods of the long count and we look at these higher units as expressed at Koba, the number of tunes being counted goes up and up by powers of 20. And these are the numbers of days in each of those units as well. Okay, so this is the highest unit. But remember, at Koba, they're counting 13 of each. So this isn't really the whole show either. These are just the individual units of time. Multiply this one and every one above it by 13 and add them together. Then you have the true number. It's about 28, almost 29 octillion years. Our cosmology, our Big Bang, is a very, very small percentage of this expression by time. The other thing to point out is that this is the amount of time leading up to 3114 BC. It's just giving you that starting point. Okay, that's the amount of time which has elapsed up to then. This doesn't even incorporate human history as the Maya conceived it. That comes later. Forahawekunku was a very special date, of course, right? And they talk about this in the inscriptions as, you know, it's very hard to decipher some of the terms that they use in writing about this event. Here's the short count date, Forahawekunku. But they talk about this happening Ti-chan, at the edge of the sky. And they talk about a hearth, a place that is perhaps the new hearth of the cosmos being established. It's all rather opaque and esoteric. We also have these scenes depicting the gods on the day Forahawekunku. In this case, this wonderful vase of the 7 gods. There's also another one very similar to it that shows more figures. It says the gods are being ordered. They're being put in their proper position. Right? That's a very nice way to talk about creation, in a sense. Now, the way the ancient Maya thought about this, though, is that there is plenty going on before Forahawekunku and plenty going on after it. Our time, or let's say the time of Pakal or the time of Yashkukmo, is in this historical time, which comes much later. But there are other kind of categories of time that we seem to see in the records. Of course, mythology, much of it takes place well before Forahawekunku. There is this middle ground where gods do things and human heroes do things, which is something I call foundational time, which is very often couched in historical terms, but it's often hard to distinguish what's a deity, let's say, and what's a real historical figure. We see this, for example, often at Palenque, right? And talk about symmetry. I mean, that's what the Maya at Palenque and at many other Maya sites, but especially at Palenque, that's what they're really into here. They're talking about time and its relationship, past and present, and future, in many cases. The tablets from the group of the cross at Palenque are wonderful in this regard because, you know, we have these images here of, in this case, the ruler Kanbahlam, Inich Kanbahlam, shown as an adult when he takes office and also as a child, as Karen Bassi demonstrated many years ago. This is one guy in 2 different phases of life, right? So they're collapsing time in one image. We'll come back to this. The other thing that they're also doing is they're graphically dividing up the mythological portion of their narrative from the historical portion of the narrative. They're very conscious of this. So everything that you read over here pertains to what's going on before Forahawekunku, around Forahawekunku, and a little bit after that. And then all of this is the early classic dynasty of Palenque. Same thing going on here. In fact, here is the record of Forahawekunku, which bridges the whole entire scene. Right? There it is. So you're going from mythology and Forahawekunku into the historical now. So, myth, history, left, right. Many examples of this at Palenque show up. This is mythological time over here. You have a time or a distance number, a temporal change of a vast amount of time here, right? Going to a historical event. And here's Kanbahlam again with his mother reenacting a mythical episode, but in real time, collapsing history. Now, I'm going to wind up very soon, but I wanted to point out a couple of other places where we see this. Not many people kind of pay attention to this very badly preserved text, but I like it. It's from Dos Pilas. We excavated this in 1989, 1990, back in the Acropolis at Dos Pilas. And it's fascinating because it has a record of Forahawekunku, 13 Baktuns completed. And the ruler who is overseeing this is given right here. This is the name of a mythical king who was overseeing that period ending back in the distant past. There are 3 of these stones. that were found in the temple. So this is probably replicating the 3 hearthstones that are referred to in the mythology. In fact, the 3 hearthstones are referred to in this text. What's really neat about this name is that the kings at Dos Pilas and at Tamarandito, and as we will see soon at Tikal, depict themselves as that very king. They identify themselves as that mythical hero when they perform their own period-ending rituals. This is an example from Tamarandito, where we have the exact same name worn. It's like a hieroglyphic mask that's being worn by the king. And at Tikal, we see the same thing. Of course, Tikal and Dos Pilas were very closely connected. In this case, the ruler Hasauchan Kawil is dressed as this mythical figure. He is reenacting the Forahawe Kunku episode in historical time. That's the whole point of these records, right? That's the whole point of this symmetry, is that the ceremonies, the calendrical ceremonies of Maya kings are reenactments. They are like-in-kind events to what the gods were doing in the distant past. Now, I'm just going to quickly go over a couple of things. My time is almost up, but I wanted to talk about the way the Maya did this in various sites, the way they collapsed time rhetorically. This fabulous altar from Piedras Negras is a great example. Again, Forahawe Kunku is referred to here. It's recorded here. But they juxtapose historical time with not only what's happening in the deep past, but also what's going to happen in the deep future. They project forward. And this is where we sometimes see these ideas of prophecy coming in, but they're not prophetic statements. They're simply showing that the king and his activities are centered in the cosmos, spatially and temporally, right? With past and future on either side. Same thing with Naranjo Altar 1, a very interesting inscription, which has this wonderful old date in the deep, deep past, the historical time of the king, and then this is juxtaposed with something that's going to be happening in the future. So this is really common in the ancient inscriptions. They're obsessed, let's say, maybe too strong of a word, but it is really, really important for a Maya king to connect his period-ending activities with what the gods were doing in the past. And there's an idea here of repetition. There's an idea here that he is continuing in an old tradition. Here is the king at Naranjo, again, dressed as that founder, doing those rituals. Finally, the last example I want to show is from this wonderful inscription recently discovered at La Corona. There are many dates recorded in this text, as you can see. It's very long. The main event they're recording, however, is the dedication of a temple, recorded in the long count date at the beginning here, 9/12/574. That's in the year 677. They refer also to a arrival of some sort of important political figure in the early classic in the year 314. This may be a foundational event for La Corona. But they even go back further to the year 3805 BC to talk about the arrival of someone else, right? Is this history? Is this mythology? Well, we don't know, and these are distinctions that the Maya themselves didn't make. You know, I'm throwing those terms out very loosely, mythology and history. These are not Maya categories of looking at time and the human place in time. But what's interesting here is that these events all share the same position in the 260-day calendar. There's a symmetry here. And not only that, these two figures in the center, this is the king of La Corona, or the lord of La Corona. We're not sure if he was an actual king. His name was Kinichiok. And as we saw with Palenque in the tablets of the Group of the Cross, these two fellows are actually one person shown in two different moments. This is the ruler as a La Corona ritual actor, performing on his period ending on the day 3 Ahau. And here he is dressed as a Kalakmul nobleman. He's been dressed, and the narrative of this text talks about this. He visits Kalakmul, and he's sort of brought into the royal court and the royal family there. He later marries a daughter from Kalakmul. So this is representing his transformation as a local lord to going to the big city and getting all dressed up. But the idea here is so profound that art, the visualization of kings on stone and in painting, will collapse time, right? They will collapse time in the short term, 2 episodes from one person's life, as at Palenque, or the underlying idea here is that this ritual actor is also embodying and re-embodying the actions of his ancestors over and over and over again. And that's the symmetry of time. That's the symmetry of kinship. The two things are the same. Thank you very much.